My mother's hand hit the table so hard the silverware jumped. The Christmas music kept playing, something about peace on earth, while 15 faces froze around the dining room. I watched her mouth form the words before I heard them. "You are dead to us. You hear me? Dead." The candles flickered. Someone's wine glass trembled. My father leaned forward, his face red, his finger pointed at me like a weapon. "Do not embarrass your sister in front of everyone." Brooke sat across from me with a smile she tried to hide behind her napkin. Her husband, Tyler, stared at his plate like he wished he could disappear into it. I set down my fork. I did not argue. I did not cry. I did not defend myself against whatever crime they had decided I committed this time. I simply folded my napkin, placed it beside my plate, and pushed back my chair. The sound of wood scraping against the floor was the loudest thing in the room. I stood up, smoothed my dress, and walked toward the door. No one stopped me. No one called my name. The last thing I saw before I stepped outside was the Christmas tree, twinkling with lights my mother had arranged to perfection. Have you ever been erased by the people who were supposed to love you most? Tell me in the comments, because I need to know I am not alone in this. For me, it happened on Christmas Eve, in a house that smelled like roasted turkey and cinnamon candles and something else underneath. Something sour. Something like betrayal. The cold hit my face the moment I stepped outside. Denver in December does not forgive, and neither did I. Snow was falling thick on the driveway, covering the cars, the hedges, the perfect lawn my father paid someone else to maintain. My heels sank into the white as I walked, each step deliberate, each breath visible in the frozen air. Behind me, the house glowed with warmth I had never been allowed to feel. I did not look back. My fingers found my car keys in my coat pocket, and beside them, something else. An envelope. Thin, worn at the edges, sealed with tape that had yellowed with age. I had been carrying it for 3 days now, ever since I found it hidden in a box of my grandmother's things. I gripped it like an anchor as I reached my car. The front door opened behind me. I heard my father's voice, muffled by distance and snow. "Megan, wait." I did not turn around. I waited for footsteps, for the crunch of snow that would mean he was coming after me. It never came. The door slammed shut. He chose warmth over me. He always did. I sat in my car with the engine off, watching the house through my rearview mirror. The windows glowed amber and red from the Christmas lights inside. Shadows moved behind the curtains, people returning to their conversations, their champagne, their carefully constructed version of family. I wondered if anyone would mention my name. Probably not. I had spent 32 years learning how to be invisible in that house. Tonight I had simply made it official. The heater groaned to life as I started the engine, and I pulled away from the curb without looking back. The streets were quiet, almost empty on Christmas Eve. Everyone was home with their families, gathered around trees, exchanging gifts, pretending the people they loved were the people they knew. My phone lit up on the passenger seat. Mom, I ignored it. Then Dad. Then Brooke. By the time I turned onto the highway, there were already 23 missed calls. I drove in silence. The radio stayed off. I did not need songs about joy and togetherness, not tonight. Tonight I needed to understand what I was holding in my pocket. Tonight I needed to understand why my grandmother had hidden something from everyone except me. I did not sleep well that night. James held me in the dark, asking no questions, offering no solutions, just warmth and presence, and the kind of love I still was not sure I deserved. When morning came, Christmas Day, the light through the curtains felt too bright, too cheerful for what I was feeling. I reached for my phone, and the number on the screen made my stomach drop. 105 missed calls, 47 text messages, 12 voicemails. I scrolled through the names. Mom, over and over. Dad, scattered between her attempts. Brooke, demanding and sharp. And then dozens of numbers I did not recognize. Something had changed overnight. The panic in those numbers told me that much. I played the first voicemail, my mother's voice tight with fury. Megan, I do not know what you think you are doing walking out like that. You embarrassed this entire family. Call me back. We need to discuss your behavior. The second voicemail was different. Her voice had shifted, the anger cracked by something else, something like fear. The lawyer called this morning, something about your grandmother's estate, about documents we did not know existed. I need you to call me, now, please. She said please? My mother never said please. James sat beside me on the bed, coffee in hand, watching my face. What is it? I shook my head, still processing. I pulled the envelope from my coat pocket, the one I had been carrying since I found it 3 days ago. I had only read the first page. I had been too afraid to read more. But now, with my mother's panic echoing in my ears, I needed to know everything. I broke the seal and unfolded the document inside. My grandmother's handwriting on the cover page, shaky but unmistakable. Last Will and Testament of Eleanor Marie Porter. Below it, a date, 6 months before she died. I turned to the next page, scanning the legal language until I found the words that made my breath stop. To my granddaughter, Megan Elizabeth Porter, I leave 60% ownership of Porter Family Bakery, the residence at 847 Maple Street, and all my personal effects. I read it again, and again, 60%, the bakery, the house. Everything my grandmother had built, everything my mother had assumed would be hers. She left it to me. My phone buzzed with a new message, an unknown number, but the area code was Denver, familiar somehow. I opened it and read the words that changed everything. The lawyer will call them tomorrow. I am sorry I could not tell you sooner. They would not let me near you. But your grandmother wanted you to know. You were always the one she trusted. Aunt Patricia, my mother's sister, the woman who had been cut off from our family 2 years ago for reasons no one would explain. Now I was beginning to understand why. James watched me read the message twice. Who is Patricia? My aunt. My mother's sister. She was exiled from the family 2 years ago. Everyone said she had a breakdown, that she needed space. But I think the truth was something else. I looked at the will in my hands, at the secret my grandmother had hidden, at the power my mother had tried to bury. I think she found this. I think she tried to tell someone. And my mother silenced her. James took my hand, steady as always. So what do you want to do? I thought about the woman who called me dead, the father who did not follow me into the snow, the sister who smiled while I was being erased. I thought about my grandmother, the only one who ever saw me, leaving me everything she had. What do I want? I want to understand why they really wanted me dead. I set down the phone and stared at the envelope, at the inheritance I never expected, at the war I had not chosen but could no longer avoid. Outside, the snow kept falling, covering Denver in white. Inside, I was finally beginning to see the truth. To understand why they wanted me dead, you have to understand how I learned to be invisible. James asked me once, early in our relationship, why I never talked about my family. I told him there was nothing to talk about. That was a lie. There was everything to talk about. I just did not have the words yet. Sitting in my apartment on Christmas morning, holding my grandmother's will, I finally found them. The memories came flooding back, not as stories I chose to tell, but as wounds I could no longer ignore. I closed my eyes and let myself remember the girl I used to be, the girl who still believed her mother might one day see her. I was 7 years old the first time I understood I was different. It was the winter recital at my elementary school in Denver, the kind of event where parents crowded into folding chairs and held their phones too high. My sister Brooke was 10, already beautiful in the way our mother valued, already graceful in ways I would never be. She performed a ballet solo to music from the Nutcracker, her pink dress floating around her like cotton candy. I watched from backstage, waiting for my turn at the piano. When Brooke finished her dance, our parents stood before the applause even started. My mother's hands came together so hard I could hear them from across the auditorium. My father beamed like she had just won an Olympic medal. Perfect, my mother mouthed, tears in her eyes. Then it was my turn. I walked to the piano on shaky legs, sat on the cold bench, and played my piece without a single mistake. When I finished, I looked for my parents in the crowd. My mother was checking her phone. My father was talking to another parent, his back half turned to the stage. Neither of them was clapping. Neither of them was looking at me. Backstage, my mother hugged Brooke so tight she lifted her off the ground. "You were a star," she said. To me, she barely glanced. "That was fine, honey. Let us go. It is late." Fine. That was the word she used. Not wonderful, not beautiful, just fine. I learned that night that fine meant forgettable. Fine meant invisible. The pattern did not break as I grew older. It only deepened. Brooke's birthday parties were catered affairs with themes and photographers and 20 screaming children. Mine were grocery store cakes and family only, with promises of something bigger next year that never came. When I brought home straight A's, my father nodded and returned to his newspaper. When Brooke scraped together a B+ after weeks of struggling, my mother threw a celebration dinner. "She worked so hard for that grade," she announced to the table. I sat there wondering what I had to do to make my hard work count. The answer, I eventually realized, was nothing. There was nothing I could do. The rules were different for me, and no one would ever explain why. I heard my mother on the phone once, talking to Aunt Patricia. I was 11, standing in the hallway where they could not see me. "Megan is just different," my mother said. "She does not fit the way Brooke does." I stood there frozen, those words sinking into me like stones in deep water. Different, did not fit. I was 11 years old, and my own mother was telling someone I did not belong. The only person who made me feel like I belonged was my grandmother. Eleanor Porter was nothing like her daughter. She had built Porter Family Bakery from nothing after my grandfather died, turning grief into flour and butter and something that fed half of Denver. Her hands were always dusted with flour, her aprons always stained, her laugh always ready. Every Sunday, I spent the afternoon at the bakery with her. She taught me to knead bread, to measure ingredients by feel instead of cups, to wait for dough to rise without rushing it. "Baking is patience, Megan," she told me once. "The ones who rush ruin everything." She never compared me to Brooke. She never made me feel like I was fine. She made me feel like I was enough. One afternoon when I was 12, I sat in her kitchen crying. I do not remember what had happened. Probably another forgotten achievement, another moment of being overlooked. My grandmother sat beside me and wiped my tears with a cloth that smelled like cinnamon. "Your mother loves you," she said. "She just does not know how to see you." "Why not?" I asked. "Because you are too much like me." And she never understood me either. She held my hands in hers, her grip strong despite her age. "One day, this will all make sense, I promise." I did not understand what she meant, but I held on to those words like a lifeline. Then she leaned closer, her voice dropping. "There is something I need you to keep safe for me someday. Not yet, but someday. You are the one I trust, Megan. Never forget that." I was 14 when I won first place in a regional essay competition. The certificate was beautiful, my name printed in gold letters, framed and ready to hang. I brought it home with my heart pounding, convinced this would be the thing that finally made them see me. My mother was hosting a dinner party that night, neighbors and friends filling our living room with laughter and wine. I waited for the right moment, then presented the certificate with trembling hands. "Mom, look, I won first place in the whole region." She glanced at it, her smile tight and brief. "That is nice, honey. Put it in your room." Then she turned back to her guests and launched into a story about Brooke's dance competition. I stood there holding my gold letters while the room buzzed around me like I was not even there. Later that night, I found the certificate in the kitchen trash. It was bent in half, shoved beneath coffee grounds and napkins. My mother saw me looking. She shrugged. It was cluttering the counter. I did not cry. I had learned by then that crying changed nothing. I smoothed the certificate, carried it to my room, and hid it in a drawer. That night, I wrote in my journal words I still remember. I will never ask them to see me again. The next morning, I called my grandmother. She answered on the second ring, already knowing something was wrong. "Bring it to me," she said. "I will hang it in the bakery where everyone can see." That certificate hung in Porter Family Bakery for 12 years. It was still there the day she died. I was 16 when I finally heard the truth spoken out loud. It was late at night, and I could not sleep. I went downstairs for water and heard my parents talking in the living room. Their voices were low, but I caught every word from the dark hallway. "I do not know what to do with her," my mother said. "She is so closed off." "She is a teenager," my father replied. "They are all like that." "No, it is different. Brooke tells me everything. Megan is like a stranger in this house." A pause. Then my mother's voice, lower, colder. "She is not like us, Robert. She never was." I waited for my father to defend me, to say something, anything that proved I belonged to him. Silence. Nothing but silence. Then his voice quiet and resigned. "Maybe she takes after your mother." My mother's response was sharp as a knife. "Do not say that." I went back to my room without the water. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, those words echoing in my skull. "Not like us. Not like us. Not like us." That night, I made a decision. If I could not belong, I would become so good at everything that they would have to notice. I threw myself into school, into work, into every achievement I could chase. I graduated valedictorian. My parents sat in the back row. I got a full scholarship to the University of Colorado. My mother called it convenient. Brooke went to a small private college on my father's money. My mother called it an investment in her future. I learned to need nothing from them. I learned to celebrate alone. I built armor so thick I forgot there was soft skin underneath. But the wound never healed. Somewhere beneath all that strength, the little girl at the piano was still looking for her parents in the crowd, still hoping, still waiting. Until Christmas Eve, when hoping finally died. I opened my eyes. The will was still in my hands. James was still beside me, patient as always. "Where did you go?" he asked softly. "Back to the beginning. Trying to understand how we got here." I set down the will and picked up my phone, scrolling past the missed calls to a folder of old photos. The bakery, my grandmother. The early days before everything fell apart. "There is something else I never told you," I said. 5 years ago, I saved them, and no one ever knew. I opened the folder and showed him the first photo, the bakery with a foreclosure sign on the door. The date stamped in the corner, exactly 5 years ago this month. The phone rang at 9 in the evening, 5 years before that Christmas when my mother declared me dead. I was at my desk in my apartment, buried in work for the marketing agency where I had built my career one campaign at a time. When I saw my grandmother's name on the screen, my heart stuttered. She never called this late. She preferred texting, little messages with too many emojis that made me smile. Something was wrong. I answered on the second ring. "Megan." Her voice was steady but strained, the way it got when she was trying to hold something together. "I need you to come to the bakery. Tonight. Do not tell your mother." My stomach dropped. She had never asked me to keep secrets from my mother before. "Is everything okay?" A long pause. "No, sweetheart. It is not." I grabbed my keys and drove through Denver traffic that felt slower than usual, my mind racing through every possibility. A health scare. A break-in. A fire. Nothing prepared me for what I found when I arrived at Porter Family Bakery and saw the lights on in the back office. My grandmother sitting at her old oak desk surrounded by papers, her face gray and tired in a way I had never seen before. On the desk in front of her were bank statements, letters stamped with red ink, and a single document that made my blood run cold. A foreclosure notice. She slid the papers toward me without a word. I picked them up and read the numbers, each one worse than the last. $400,000 in debt. 60 days until the bank took everything. "How?" I whispered. "How did this happen?" She told me the truth then, the truth my mother had been hiding for 2 years. Brooke and Tyler had taken over management of the bakery after my grandfather's death, my mother's idea, her way of preparing them for the future. But Brooke had no head for business. Tyler had big dreams and no follow-through. They expanded too fast, hired the wrong people, spent money on image instead of infrastructure. And when the losses started piling up, they hid them. They falsified financial reports. They told my grandmother everything was fine while the foundation crumbled beneath her feet. "Your mother knew," my grandmother said, her voice cracking. "She helped them cover it up. She thought I would not notice. Why did you not stop them?" "Because I wanted to believe my daughter would do the right thing." She opened a drawer and pulled out a folder thick with documents. Inside were the falsified reports, Brooke's signature on everyone, and beneath them, emails between my mother and my sister discussing how to keep Mother from finding out. My hands shook as I read the words. They had lied to her face for 2 years while driving her life's work into the ground. "I should have seen it sooner," my grandmother said. "I was too tired, too hopeful. Now we have 60 days, and I do not know what to do." I looked at the numbers again. $400,000, 60 days. No investors, no loans approved. The bakery my grandmother had built with her bare hands after my grandfather died was about to disappear. And if it did, my mother and Brooke would find a way to blame her. They would rewrite history the way they always did, making themselves the victims, making her the villain who mismanaged the family legacy. I could not let that happen. "I will do it," I said. My grandmother shook her head. "Megan, no, that is too much. Your apartment." I did not let her finish. "My apartment is just walls. This bakery is your legacy. It is our family's name." I did not say what I was really thinking, that the bakery was the only part of this family that had ever felt like home, that saving it was saving the only place where I had ever belonged. But there was one condition. "No one can know," I told her. "Not Mom, not Brooke, not anyone." She looked at me with confusion and something else, something like pain. "Why?" "Because if they know, they will find a way to ruin it. Or take credit for it." She nodded slowly, understanding settling into her features. She knew her daughter. She knew what Victoria was capable of. "I will keep your secret," she said, "and I will remember what you did." Then she added something that would not make sense to me until years later. "I am changing my will tomorrow. Whatever happens, you will be protected." I waved her off. "I am not doing this for inheritance." She smiled, sad and knowing. "I know. That is exactly why you deserve it." The next morning, I walked into a bank and signed papers that put my apartment as collateral for a $250,000 loan. The banker asked if I was sure. I signed without hesitation. The contract went in my desk drawer. It is still there today. Then I started making phone calls. I reached out to every contact I had built in 10 years of marketing work. I called in favors from food bloggers, journalists, influencers, anyone who could help get the word out. I redesigned the bakery's logo, its packaging, its entire social media presence. I created a campaign called 3 Generations of Denver Tradition, telling the story of my grandmother, her recipes, her legacy. The irony was not lost on me. The campaign featured photos of my grandmother and Brooke. Not me. Never me. I worked 18-hour days for 6 months. My day job at the agency, my nights at the bakery. I learned the books, fired the wasteful vendors, renegotiated every contract. I hired a real accountant, one who reported only to me and my grandmother. I lost 15 pounds. My apartment became a place I slept for 4 hours a night before doing it all again. My friends stopped calling because I never answered. James, who I had just started dating, almost left. I told him just enough. "My family needs me. I cannot explain." He stayed. He waited. One night, I was at the bakery at 2 a.m, fixing a spreadsheet that had been driving me crazy for hours. The back door opened and I froze. Tyler walked in, saw me sitting there, and stopped dead. His face went through several expressions before settling on something I could not read. "What are you doing here?" I lied smoothly, the way I had learned to lie in a family that punished truth. Grandma asked me to help with some filing. He stared at me for a long moment, something shifting behind his eyes. Then he nodded once and left without another word. I never knew what he saw that night, but I think he knew more than he ever admitted. By April, the bakery was profitable again. The debt was paid down to manageable levels. New customers were flooding in from the marketing campaign. The foreclosure notice became a distant memory. Brooke took the meetings I had set up. She signed the contracts I had negotiated. She posted on social media accounts I had created. She used passwords I had chosen, passwords she still did not know. The email system, the accounting software, the vendor portals, everything ran through my invisible hands. I kept a private spreadsheet that I never showed anyone. Hours worked, over 1,000. Money invested, $250,000 plus my apartment as collateral. Credit received 0. In May, they threw a grand reopening party. The bakery was transformed, a new awning, new display cases, press coverage from every local outlet. The mayor of Denver cut a ribbon. The local news ran a segment. My mother stood at the center of it all, glowing with pride she had not earned. She raised her champagne glass and gave a toast that I can still hear in my nightmares. To my daughter Brooke and her husband Tyler, who saved our family's legacy. The room erupted in applause. Brooke beamed. Tyler shifted uncomfortably beside her. My father clapped with genuine pride, beaming at the wrong daughter. And me? I stood in the corner, near the back door, champagne in my hand untouched. I watched my mother praise the people who had almost destroyed everything while I became invisible again. No one looked at me. No one thanked me. I was exactly where I had always been, the background, the shadow, the girl who did not fit. After the party ended and the guests had gone, I slipped outside to the alley behind the bakery. The night air was cool against my face. The champagne I had not drunk was still in my hand. My grandmother found me there, moving slower than she used to, the stress of the past year visible in every step. She stood beside me in silence for a moment. Then she took my hand. "I know, sweetheart. I have always known." My eyes burned, but I did not cry. "It is okay, Grandma. I did not do it for credit. I know. That is what makes it matter." She squeezed my hand tighter, her grip still strong despite everything. "I am going to make sure you are taken care of, no matter what happens to me." I tried to interrupt, but she shook her head. "Listen to me. When I am gone, there will be something for you, something they cannot take." She pressed a kiss to my temple, the way she used to when I was a little girl. "You are the one I trust. Never forget that." I set down the phone and looked at James. The photos were still on the screen, the foreclosure sign, the grand reopening, the before and after of a sacrifice no one knew I made. "Grandma kept her promise," I said. "Even from the grave." My phone buzzed with another voicemail, my mother's voice, strained and afraid. "Megan, the lawyer called this morning. Something about your grandmother's estate, about documents we did not know existed. I need you to call me, now, please." Documents they did not know existed. But I did. I had been carrying them in my pocket for 3 days. And now, finally, everyone was about to learn the truth. The voicemail ended and my mother's voice still echoed in my ears. The lawyer called. Documents we did not know existed. I set the phone down on the kitchen counter and looked at James. He was watching me with that patient expression he always wore when my family was involved, the one that said he would wait as long as I needed. Outside the window, snow was still falling on Christmas morning, covering Denver in white, making everything look clean and new. Inside my apartment, I felt something I had not felt in years. I felt calm. Not the numb calm of survival. Not the forced calm of pretending everything was fine. Real calm. The kind that comes when you finally stop running from the truth. James slid a plate of pancakes toward me. "You should eat something before the next wave hits." I almost smiled. "You think there is another wave?" He raised an eyebrow, There is always another wave with your family. He was right. There was always another wave. But for the first time, I was not afraid of drowning. I picked up my phone and scrolled through the chaos on the screen. 105 missed calls. The number matched exactly what I had seen earlier, but somehow it felt different now, heavier with meaning. I started counting. Mom, 34 calls. Dad, 8. Brooke, 19. Unknown numbers, 44. 44 calls from numbers I did not recognize. That was new. I scrolled through the text messages next, 47 of them, ranging from furious to confused to desperate. The voicemails numbered 12, each one a chapter in the story of my family's unraveling. I noticed a pattern as I studied the timestamps. The first wave came between 11 at night and midnight, right after I walked out. Those were the angry calls. My mother and Brooke demanding I come back and apologize, threatening consequences they never specified. The second wave hit between midnight and 3 in the morning, my father's confused attempts to play peacemaker, my mother's voice growing more frantic with each message. But the third wave, the one that started at 6 in the morning, that was different. Something had shifted overnight. The anger had melted into panic, and I was beginning to understand why. I played the voicemails in order, letting my mother's voice fill the quiet kitchen. The first one was exactly what I expected. Megan, I do not know what you think you are doing, walking out like that. You embarrassed this entire family. Call me back. We need to discuss your behavior. No apology. No acknowledgement of what she had said to me. Just demands for me to fix whatever she thought I had broken. The second voicemail was from Brooke, her voice sharp and accusing. What did you say to Aunt Patricia? She called Mom and they had some huge fight. Mom has been crying for an hour. This is your fault. Fix it. My Aunt Patricia, the woman who had been exiled from our family 2 years ago, the woman who had just sent me that mysterious text. She was making moves, and the family was already cracking. The third voicemail was my father, tired and confused at 2:30 in the morning. Megan, it is your father. I do not know what is happening. Your mother is very upset. She will not tell me everything. Please just call someone. Call me. He did not know what was happening because my mother never told him the truth about anything. He was always the last to know, always following orders he did not understand. The fourth voicemail made me grip the counter. My mother's voice had changed completely. Gone was the fury, the control, the performance. What remained was something I had never heard from her before. Fear. Megan. The lawyer called this morning. Something about Mother's estate, about documents we did not know existed. I need you to call me. Now, please. She said please. In 32 years, I could count on one hand the number of times my mother had said please to me. The fifth voicemail was my father again, his voice strained with worry. Your mother is having chest pains. We are thinking of going to the hospital. Please, Megan, whatever this is about, we can work it out. Chest pains. I set the phone down and stared at the window. James watched me without speaking. I knew what he was thinking because I was thinking the same thing. Was it real? My mother had chest pains when I was 16 and refused to go to Brooke's dance competition. She had chest pains when I chose my own college instead of the one my parents picked. She had chest pains when I moved out at 22. Her health was a weapon, always deployed at exactly the right moment to pull me back into line. But she was also 58 now. Stress could cause real damage. What if this time was different? James read my face like a book. You are wondering if it is real. I am always wondering if it is real. What does your gut say? I paused, searching for an honest answer. That she is fine, and that I will feel guilty either way. He nodded slowly. So what are you going to do? I looked at the phone, at the missed calls piling up, at the voicemails filled with panic and manipulation. If it were a real emergency, they would have called an ambulance. They would have gone to the hospital. The fact that they were still calling me meant they wanted something else. They wanted control. They wanted me to come running, to fix whatever mess they had made, to fall back into my invisible role. I picked up the phone and turned it face down on the counter. I am not calling back. Not yet. I opened my text messages and found the thread from the unknown number. Aunt Patricia. I scrolled back to read everything she had sent in the hours since I walked out of that house. The words hit me one by one. I have been trying to reach you for 2 years. Your mother blocked my number from the family phone plan. She told everyone I had a breakdown, that I was unstable. The truth is, I found out what she did to Mother's will. I confronted her. She cut me off completely. I remembered the family story about Patricia. 2 years ago, she stopped coming to holidays. My mother said she was going through something, that she needed space, that we should respect her privacy and not reach out. No one questioned it. No one tried to contact her. We all just accepted that Patricia was gone. Another casualty of whatever mysterious force made people disappear from our family. But the truth was so much simpler and so much worse. Patricia found the hidden will. She tried to tell someone, and my mother silenced her. The final message in the thread made my heart pound. Your grandmother came to me before she died. She told me everything. About the bakery. About what you did. About the will she was hiding. She made me promise to find you when the time was right. The lawyer is on your side. Trust him. My grandmother had built a network before she died. Patricia as the keeper of secrets. The lawyer as the protector. And me, the granddaughter she trusted to bring the truth into the light. I was not alone. I had never been alone. I just had not known it yet. My phone buzzed with a new notification, but this time it was not from my family. It was an email from work, my boss's name in the sender line. Subject, Congratulations. Official announcement Monday. I opened it and read the words that changed everything. Megan, the board has approved your promotion to Chief Marketing Officer. You have earned this. We will announce Monday at the all-hands meeting. CMO. The position I had been working toward for years. A team of 20 people reporting to me. A salary that would nearly triple my current income. Stock options, a corner office, everything I had built for myself while my family dismissed my career as a little marketing job. James noticed the shift in my expression. Good news? I got the promotion. CMO. It is official Monday. His face broke into a grin. Your family has no idea who they are dealing with, do they? No, they never have. I thought about my mother calling me dead at Christmas dinner. I thought about my father demanding I not embarrass my sister. I thought about Brooke's smug smile as I walked out the door. They thought I was nothing. They thought I needed them. They had no idea I was about to become one of the youngest CMOs in my company's history while holding 60% of the bakery they assumed was theirs. James and I sat at the kitchen table with my phone between us. I explained everything. The will, the inheritance, the anti-contest clause Patricia had mentioned. The lawyer my grandmother chose specifically because he was outside my mother's control. James listened without interrupting, his mind working through the pieces. So, what is the plan? I thought about it carefully. I could call my mother back, let her yell at me, let her manipulate me into some version of peace that was really just my surrender. I could go to their house and apologize for crimes I did not commit. I could fall back into the role they designed for me, the invisible daughter, the one who gives and never receives. Or I could do something different. I picked up my phone and searched for the number Aunt Patricia had given me. Daniel Whitmore, the lawyer my grandmother trusted. I need to know exactly what she left me before I talk to any of them. James nodded. Smart. Do not let them control the narrative. They have controlled it for 32 years. That ends today. I dialed the number. The line rang once, twice. Then a calm, professional voice answered. Ms. Porter, I have been expecting your call. My grandmother was right. He was on my side, and he had been waiting for this moment just like I had. Mr. Whitmore, I think I need to hear the full picture. The words came out steadier than I expected, given that my hands were trembling. I put the phone on speaker so James could hear, and his calm voice filled my kitchen like something solid and reassuring. "Yes, Ms. Porter, I think you do. This may take a while." I sat down at the table, James beside me, the snow still falling outside the window. I had the feeling that everything I thought I knew about my family was about to change. I was right. Daniel Whitmore was 72 years old, a senior partner at Whitmore and Associates, specializing in estate law for 45 years. He was not the family lawyer. My mother did not even know his name. That was the point. "Your grandmother came to me specifically because she wanted someone outside your family's sphere of influence," he explained. She was very clear about that. I understood immediately. My grandmother knew what my mother was capable of. She knew any lawyer connected to the family would be vulnerable to manipulation, to pressure, to the kind of control my mother wielded like a weapon. So she found someone my mother could not touch. "I made your grandmother a promise, Ms. Porter, to ensure her wishes were honored exactly as she intended, no matter who tried to interfere." His voice carried a protectiveness that surprised me. He had clearly respected my grandmother, maybe even loved her, in the way you love a client who becomes something more. He cleared his throat before continuing. "I should tell you, I have already received 3 calls from your mother this morning. She is demanding I delay the reading." I declined. Of course she was. My mother was already trying to manipulate the process, already trying to buy time to figure out how to undo whatever my grandmother had done. But this time, she had met someone she could not control. Mr. Whitmore explained the history of the will, and with each sentence the picture became clearer. My grandmother had created her first will 15 years ago, a standard document that split everything equally between my mother and Aunt Patricia. My mother was named executor. But 5 years ago, after the bakery crisis, everything changed. "Your grandmother began to suspect something was wrong," he said. "She noticed discrepancies between what your mother reported and what she saw with her own eyes. She started keeping her own records." I thought of my grandmother at her old oak desk, surrounded by papers, her sharp eyes catching the lies my mother thought she had hidden. "She discovered that your mother had been misrepresenting the bakery's finances to her, and she discovered something else." He paused. "She discovered what you did, Ms. Porter. The mortgage, the marketing, the 18-hour days." My throat tightened. "She told you about that? She told me everything. She kept meticulous records. Your grandmother said you were the only one who loved the bakery the way she did, the only one who understood that legacy is not about ownership. It is about care." I closed my eyes, tears threatening to fall. She knew. She had always known. Every sacrifice I made thinking I was invisible, she had seen it all. Then his voice grew heavier. "She also discovered that your mother found the original amended will and hid it." My blood ran cold. "She knew Mom was hiding it?" "Yes, that is why she made a new one. With me, in secret. The new will was created 6 months before my grandmother died. After she confirmed what I had done for the bakery. After she confirmed what my mother had hidden." Mr. Whitmore read the terms slowly, each word landing like a stone. "To Megan Elizabeth Porter. 60% ownership of Porter Family Bakery, the residence at 847 Maple Street, all personal effects, jewelry and photographs, and a letter to be delivered privately. To Patricia Sullivan, $100,000 cash, the complete recipe collection and baking equipment. The will noted for the sister who told the truth, even when it cost her everything. To Victoria and Robert Porter, 30% ownership of the bakery, held in trust. They would receive dividends but could never sell or transfer their shares. The will noted, to ensure they are cared for, but cannot destroy what they never built. To Brooke Porter Mitchell, 10% ownership, same trust restrictions as her parents. No access to the family home. The will noted to my granddaughter Brooke, who I hope will one day understand the difference between inheriting and earning." The room was silent when he finished. James squeezed my hand. I could not speak. 60%. The house. Everything. She gave me control, Mr. Whitmore said quietly, intentionally, permanently. But there was more. Your grandmother anticipated resistance, he continued. She included what we call an in terrorem clause, a no-contest provision. He explained it in simple terms. If any beneficiary challenged the validity of the will, they would automatically forfeit their entire inheritance. Their share would be redistributed to the remaining beneficiaries. In practice, if my mother contested, her 30% would go to me. If Brooke contested, her 10% would go to me. If both contested, I would inherit 90%. Your grandmother knew your mother would try to fight this. She made sure that fighting would cost everything. It is not a trap, it is a choice. Accept the terms, or lose it all. I asked the question that was burning in my mind. Has my mother been told about this clause? There was a careful pause. I informed her this morning. What did she say? Long silence. She hung up on me. Then called back 20 minutes later, much calmer. She asked how to reach you. My mother knew about the clause, and instead of exploding, she had gone quiet. She was calculating, planning. That scared me more than her anger ever could. There is one more thing, Mr. Whitmore said. Your grandmother left you a letter. It was to be delivered only after the will was read to you. I have it here. I can read it to you, or I can mail it. My voice cracked. Read it. Please. James took my hand as the lawyer began to read my grandmother's words. My dearest Megan, if you are hearing this, then I am gone, and the truth is finally coming out. I am sorry I could not tell you sooner. I wanted to protect you from knowing how much I knew, about what your mother did, about what you sacrificed, about all the years you spent invisible in a family that should have celebrated you. You saved my bakery. You saved my legacy. And you never asked for a single thing in return. That is not weakness, sweetheart. That is the kind of strength your mother will never understand. I am giving you the bakery not because you earned it, though you did, but because you are the only one I trust to decide what happens next. Keep it, sell it, burn it to the ground. It is yours. Do what brings you peace. The house is for you to have a place that is truly yours. Fill it with love. Fill it with people who see you. I know you think I did not notice all those years. I noticed everything. I just could not fix it while I was alive. This is me fixing it now. You were always the one, Megan. Never forget that. All my love, forever, Grandma Eleanor. I could not speak. The tears I had been holding back for 32 years finally broke free. James held me while I sobbed. The first real tears I had cried in years. Not from sadness, from being seen. Finally, completely. Mr. Whitmore gave me time to compose myself before explaining the legal timeline. The official reading would be January 2nd at his office. All beneficiaries would be present. The will would become public record after the reading. He had been strategic about what he disclosed to my family. My mother knew there was a new will. She knew I was the primary beneficiary. She knew about the anti-contest clause, but she did not know the exact percentages yet. I have options, he told me. I could be present at the reading or send a representative. I could claim my inheritance without ever speaking to my family again. There is one more thing you should know, he added. Your sister Brooke's husband called me this morning, separately. He asked to meet with me, privately. Without Brooke, Tyler. The man who had seen me at the bakery at 2 a.m. 5 years ago. The man who had stared at me with something strange in his eyes at the grand reopening party. He was making moves. But I did not know yet whose side he was on. When the call ended, my apartment was quiet. James still held my hand. The will, the letter, the clause, the percentages, all of it settling into my bones. I looked at what I now held. 60% of a profitable bakery, a Victorian house worth nearly $1 million, legal protection against any challenge, the truth documented and witnessed, and allies I never knew I had. Aunt Patricia, the lawyer, possibly Tyler. My grandmother had built an army for me before she died. And my family, the people who had called me dead just last night, they held minority shares they could not sell. a secret that was about to be public, and a clause that punished any fight. They had no leverage, no control, no cards left to play. James looked at me with that steady gaze I had come to love. "So, what do you want to do?" I met his eyes and felt something I had never felt before. Power. I want to go to the reading. I want to look my mother in the eye when she hears the numbers. I want her to know that Grandma saw everything. And she chose me anyway. My phone buzzed with a new text, a number I did not recognize. "This is Tyler. I need to talk to you. It is about Brooke and the bakery. She is planning something. Can we meet?" The game was shifting, and I was no longer playing defense. Tyler's text was still glowing on my phone when I typed my response. What kind of something? 3 dots appeared on the screen. Disappeared. Appeared again. Then his message came through. "She is coming to you. Today. Do not trust anything she says. I will explain everything when we meet." Before I could respond, the apartment buzzer rang. The sound cut through the quiet morning like a warning. I looked at James. He looked at the door. "That was fast," he said. I checked the intercom camera and saw exactly what Tyler had predicted. Brooke standing in the lobby of my building, wearing a designer coat and oversized sunglasses despite the gray December sky. In her hands was a gift bag with tissue paper spilling out the top, the image of a concerned sister bearing peace offerings. I could ignore her. Let her stand there until she gave up. But Tyler's warning echoed in my mind. She was planning something. Better to know what than to wonder. James stepped toward the door. "I can tell her to leave." I shook my head. "No, I want to hear what she has to say." He studied my face for a moment, then nodded. "I will be in the bedroom, if you need me." He squeezed my hand and disappeared down the hallway. I took a breath and pressed the button to let Brooke in. The elevator took forever to reach my floor, or maybe time just moved differently when you were about to face someone who had spent 35 years pretending to be your sister. When the knock came, it was soft, polite, the knock of someone who wanted to seem harmless. I opened the door, and there she was. Brooke's face was arranged in perfect sisterly concern, the kind she had practiced in mirrors since childhood. Megan. "Oh, thank God. I have been so worried about you." She held out the gift bag like an offering. "I brought you something. A peace offering." I took the bag without enthusiasm and looked inside. A candle, a bottle of wine, a card that said "Sisters Forever" in gold script. The same card she had given me for the last 5 Christmases, always the same, always meaningless. She swept past me into the apartment without being invited, her eyes scanning the room like she was cataloging everything. "Your place is so cozy," she said. "Very you." The word cozy came out like an insult wrapped in silk. She meant small. She meant less than. She meant exactly what she had always meant when she looked at my life. I set the gift bag on the counter and waited. Brooke perched on the edge of my couch, crossing her legs and folding her hands in her lap like she was posing for a portrait. "Megan, I think we need to talk. Sister to sister." She launched into her performance without waiting for me to sit down. I know things got heated at dinner. Mom was out of line. We all said things we did not mean. I noticed how she said "we," spreading the blame evenly, erasing the specific words my mother had used. "You are dead to us." That was not something everyone said. That was something my mother said with my father's support, while Brooke smiled behind her napkin. "You have to understand," Brooke continued. "Mom has been under so much stress. The bakery, Grandma's death, the holidays. She did not mean what she said. None of us did. No apology, no acknowledgement. Just explanations and excuses dressed up as concern." "But that is not why I am here," she said, leaning forward, her voice dropping to something she probably thought sounded warm. "I am here because I am worried about you. This whole thing with Grandma's estate, it has gotten so complicated." She paused, studying my face for a reaction. "I gave her nothing. I talked to Mom this morning, and the lawyer. There seems to be some confusion about Grandma's wishes. I think, and Mom agrees, that the best thing for everyone is if we just simplify things. I kept my voice neutral. Simplify how? Brooke's smile widened, showing teeth. Well, you do not even want the bakery, do you? You have your career, your life here. It would be easier if you just signed your share over. To the family. There it was. The real reason for the gift bag, the sisterly concern, the carefully constructed performance. She wanted my inheritance. She wanted me to hand over everything my grandmother had given me so they could pretend I had never existed at all. Think about it, Megan. Running a bakery is exhausting. All those employees, the suppliers, the regulations. You would be tied down. Is that really what you want? And that old house? It needs so much work. It would drain you. She made it sound like she was doing me a favor, like giving up my inheritance was the sensible choice, the easy choice, the choice any reasonable person would make. We could buy you out, she offered. A fair price. You could use the money for whatever you want, travel, a bigger apartment. She glanced around my living room with barely concealed disdain. Mom and I would handle everything. You would not have to lift a finger. I heard what she was really saying. Give up your inheritance. Let us control everything. Disappear back into the background where you belong. The same message I had heard my entire life, now dressed up with a price tag. I asked the question I knew would rattle her. What does Tyler think about this plan? Her smile froze for half a second. Tyler supports whatever I decide. He always does. But her voice pitched slightly higher, the first crack in her performance. I let the silence stretch until she started to squirm. That is very generous of you, Brooke, but I do not think I will be signing anything over. Her mask slipped just enough for me to see the irritation underneath. Megan, be reasonable. You do not know anything about running a business. This is not like your little marketing projects. The bakery is a real company with real responsibilities. The condescension was fully exposed now, no longer hidden behind sisterly concern. She had spent 35 years believing I was less than her, and she could not help letting it show. I smiled, and it was not a kind smile. You are right, I do not know anything about the bakery. Except for the passwords to every system. The vendor contracts I renegotiated. The marketing strategy I built from scratch. The $250,000 loan I took out to save it from foreclosure. Brooke's face went white. What are you talking about? 5 years ago. When you and Tyler almost bankrupted the whole company. I am the one who saved it, Brooke, while you were taking credit at the grand reopening. The room shifted. I could feel the power dynamic inverting in real time. For the first time in our lives, I was not the one on the defensive. Brooke stared at me like she had never seen me before, like she was finally seeing me. I pressed further. But there is something I am curious about. If you love the bakery so much, why are you trying to sell it? All the remaining color drained from her face. I do not know what you are talking about. Her voice came out too sharp, too fast. Hartwell Foods Corporation. Ring a bell? They approached you 6 months ago, offered to buy Porter Family Bakery outright. You have been in negotiations since October, without telling Mom, without telling anyone. I turned from the window to face her directly. You were going to sell Grandma's legacy to a corporation, and pocket the money yourself. Brooke stood up so fast she nearly knocked over the coffee table. How do you know about that? Who told you? The answer came from the hallway. James stepped into the doorway, his presence calm and solid. He had heard everything. I think this conversation is over, Brooke. She looked between us, calculating, trapped. Her carefully constructed mask had shattered completely. What replaced it was something I had never seen from her before. Genuine fear. The transformation was complete. Gone was the concerned sister with her gift bag and practiced smile. In her place stood a woman with cold fury in her eyes. You think you are so clever, do not you? The quiet one, the invisible one, playing victim all these years. I said nothing. I did not need to defend myself to her anymore. "Mom will never let you have that bakery," she hissed. "She will contest the will. She will drag you through court for years. By the time the lawyers are done, there will not be anything left for anyone." I kept my voice calm, almost gentle. "She can try, but you should probably tell her about the anti-contest clause first. If she challenges the will, she loses everything. And so do you." "Grandma thought of everything, Brooke. Even you." Her face contorted through rage, fear, and disbelief. "This is not over. I think it is." I walked to the door and opened it. Waited. She grabbed her coat and her bag, leaving the gift on the coffee table like evidence of her failed performance. At the door, she turned one last time. "You are going to regret this, Megan. I promise you that. Goodbye, Brooke." The door closed behind her. I leaned against the wall and exhaled slowly. James came to stand beside me. "You okay?" "Better than okay. I think I just met my sister for the first time." I picked up the gift bag from the coffee table, the candle, the wine, the Sisters Forever card. I dropped it all in the trash where it belonged. "She was never going to share," I said quietly. "She was always going to take everything and leave me with nothing. Now she cannot." My phone buzzed with a text from Tyler. The message was simple. "I just heard from Brooke. She is furious. We need to meet. Tomorrow, noon, the coffee shop on 5th and Maple. Come alone." Tyler was ready to talk. He knew more than he had revealed. And tomorrow, I was going to find out exactly whose side he was on. The coffee shop on 5th and Maple was small and quiet, the kind of place where people came to have conversations they did not want overheard. I arrived 5 minutes early on December 27th, 2 days after Christmas, and found Tyler already waiting in a corner booth. He was facing the door, watching everyone who entered, and when he saw me, something like relief crossed his face. He looked different than I remembered, thinner, darker circles under his eyes. Not the confident husband who stood beside Brooke at family gatherings, toasting to successes he had not earned. This was a man who had stopped sleeping. I slid into the booth across from him. Neither of us smiled. "Thank you for warning me about Brooke," I said. He shook his head slowly. "I should have warned you years ago." He stared at his coffee, untouched and probably cold by now. When he finally spoke, his voice was heavy with exhaustion. "I have been living a lie for 7 years, Megan. I thought I married into a successful family. Turns out I married into a performance." He told me how it started, a business conference 8 years ago. Brooke was charming, confident, the heir to a family empire. He fell for the image she projected, the story she told about Porter Family Bakery and the legacy she would inherit. By the time he realized the empire was built on sand and secrets, he was already married. Too deep to get out, too ashamed to admit he had been fooled. "When the bakery almost went under 5 years ago, I thought we were done," he said. Then suddenly everything turned around. New marketing, new customers, the debt disappearing. Brooke took all the credit. Your mother threw her a party. But I knew. He looked up at me, his eyes hollow. I knew Brooke did not do any of it. She could not even remember the password to the email. I started watching, asking questions. She got defensive. Your mother changed the subject. Then I found the mortgage documents in your grandmother's office. Your name was on everything, Megan. The loan, the vendor contracts, the marketing strategy. You saved that bakery. And they buried you. Hearing it from an outsider hit differently than knowing it myself. Why did you not say something? His face twisted with shame. Because I was a coward. Because I thought maybe I was wrong. Because your mother made it very clear that loyalty meant silence. He met my eyes. I am done being silent. He pulled out his phone and slid it across the table. I have been documenting everything for the past 2 years. Financial records, emails, text messages. Brooke has been stealing from the bakery, and I have proof. I picked up the phone and started scrolling through the files. What I found made my stomach turn. Over the past 3 years, Brooke had transferred $187,000 from the bakery into a private account. The transfers were disguised as marketing expenses and consultant fees. Fake invoices, fake vendors, all routing to an account in her name only. Not the family's, not Tyler's, just hers. But that was not all. He showed me emails between Brooke and Hartwell Foods Corporation, the company I had confronted her about yesterday. They had offered $3.2 million for Porter Family Bakery. Brooke had been negotiating in secret for 6 months. She was going to sell without telling anyone, Tyler said. Take the money and disappear. She told me we would start fresh somewhere else. Like the family did not matter. Like your grandmother's legacy was just something to cash in. I kept scrolling, my anger building with every document. Does my mother know about Hartwell? No. Brooke kept that from everyone. But she knows about the skimming. She has been covering for Brooke for years. They have a deal. Brooke keeps the bakery looking profitable. Your mother keeps her position as matriarch. It is a house of cards, Megan, and it is about to fall. I set down the phone and looked at him. Why are you giving this to me? He slid a USB drive across the table. Because you are the only one who can stop her. And because I need a witness when I file for divorce. Tyler laid out his terms clearly. He wanted a clean divorce. No alimony, no claims on the bakery. In exchange, he would testify about Brooke's financial misconduct. All he asked was that I not pursue him legally for whatever role he had played. I looked the other way, he admitted. I am not innocent, but I never took a dime. How do I know this is not another trap? He pulled up a screenshot on his phone. An email from a divorce attorney dated 2 weeks ago, consultation scheduled, separation agreement drafted. I have already started. This is not a negotiation, Megan. This is me getting out. I studied his face, looking for deception, for some hint that this was another layer of manipulation. All I saw was exhaustion and desperation. A man who had finally hit the wall. I took the USB drive. I will review everything. If it checks out, we have a deal. It will check out. I made sure of it. We shook hands across the table. 2 people bound by shared betrayal, reaching for different kinds of freedom. That evening, I was at home reviewing the files on Tyler's USB drive when my phone rang. Aunt Patricia. I answered immediately. Did you meet with Tyler? She asked. How did you know about that? Because he called me first. We have been talking for weeks. The revelation hit me like a wave. Patricia continued, her voice steady but warm. Tyler reached out to me in November. He was looking for someone who knew the family's secrets. I told him about the hidden will, about what your mother did. We have been building a case together, Megan. For you. I sank onto the couch. Why did you not tell me? Because I was not sure you were ready. She paused. Your grandmother asked me to wait, to let the truth come out naturally. She always said you would know when the time was right. After Christmas dinner, after what Victoria said, I knew the time had come. I was not alone. I had never been alone. My grandmother had built a network before she died. Patricia as the keeper of secrets, Tyler as the inside witness, the lawyer as the protector, all of them waiting for this moment. Patricia told me the full story of her exile. 2 years ago, she was helping my mother sort through my grandmother's papers when she found the hidden will. Victoria's face when she saw me holding it, Patricia said. I have never seen such fear. She told me I was confused, that it was an old draft. I knew she was lying. I confronted her. Within a week, my mother had told the entire family that Patricia was having a mental breakdown, that she was making things up, that grief had unhinged her. She blocked Patricia's number from the family phones, told everyone she needed space. 2 years of exile because Patricia knew the truth. Your grandmother came to me before she died, Patricia continued. She knew what Victoria had done. She made me promise to find you when the time was right. She said, Patricia, Megan is the one. When Victoria goes too far, find her. Give her everything. Christmas dinner was Victoria going too far. So here I am. Everything Eleanor asked me to keep safe. It is all yours now. Over the next 2 days we planned. Me, James, Patricia on video calls. the lawyer confirming every document on Tyler's USB drive. The evidence was legitimate, Brooke's embezzlement was clear, the Hartwell deal was documented, the anti-contest clause was airtight. James asked the question, "So what is the plan?" I had been thinking about it for 2 days. I could go to the police, press charges, watch Brooke get arrested. I could present the evidence at the will reading and humiliate everyone. I could walk away and never speak to any of them again. But none of those felt right. "Mom is having her New Year's Eve party," I said. "December 31st. The whole family will be there. Extended relatives, family friends. That is when I show up. With Patricia, with the truth." James raised an eyebrow. "You are giving them a chance, after everything?" "I am giving myself a chance. To know I did this right. Not to humiliate them. To give them one chance to choose. Accept Grandma's wishes, or lose everything." Patricia's voice came through the speaker, soft with emotion. Eleanor would be proud. On December 30th, I stood at my window watching the city lights. Tomorrow was New Year's Eve. Tomorrow I would walk into my parents' house for the first time since I was declared dead. Tomorrow everything would change. The USB drive was copied and secured in multiple locations. Patricia was arriving in Denver tonight. Tyler was ready to support from the sidelines. James would be by my side. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "I know you are planning something. Whatever it is, do not come to the party. You are not welcome." I smiled for the first time in days. She was scared. Good. I typed back a simple response. "I will see you tomorrow, Mom." Then I turned off my phone and went to sleep. Tomorrow the truth would finally have its day. December 31st, 6:47 in the evening. I stood in front of my mirror, adjusting the simple black dress I had chosen for tonight. James was already in his suit, watching me with steady eyes. "You ready for this?" I met his gaze in the reflection. I have been ready for 32 years. I just did not know it. My phone buzzed with a text from Patricia. "Downstairs. The car is waiting." I took one deep breath, picked up my coat, and walked toward the door. They had declared me dead at Christmas dinner. Tonight, I was coming back to life. The drive through Denver was quiet. Patricia sat beside me in the back seat while James drove. The streets sparkled with New Year's decorations, lights strung from lampposts, revelers already gathering on sidewalks. Patricia squeezed my hand. "Eleanor is with us tonight." I nodded, my throat too tight for words. When we turned onto my parents' street, the house came into view. Not my grandmother's Victorian, but my mother's newer McMansion in the suburbs, all sharp angles and perfect landscaping. Cars lined the driveway, and every window blazed with light. Through the glass I could see guests mingling, champagne glasses catching the glow, the glitter of a party in full swing. The same party I had attended for years, always fading into the background. Tonight I would walk through the front door. James parked across the street and looked at me in the rearview mirror. Last chance to turn around. I shook my head. They declared me dead. I think it is time for a resurrection. I opened the car door and stepped into the cold night air. We walked up the path together, Patricia on my right, James on my left. Our footsteps crunched on the salted walkway, and the front door loomed ahead, decorated with a silver wreath. Inside I could hear music playing softly, something about old acquaintance. The song that everyone sang at midnight, pretending the new year would be different from the last. I did not ring the doorbell. I opened the door myself and walked in. The foyer was crowded with coats and guests. A neighbor saw me first, Mrs. Henderson, her mouth falling open like she had seen a ghost. Then Uncle Richard, his champagne glass frozen halfway to his lips. Whispers spread immediately, heads turning, conversations dying. I walked steadily toward the living room, Patricia and James flanking me like witnesses. I could hear my mother's laugh somewhere ahead, the performance laugh, too bright, too sharp. And then the laughter stopped. She appeared in the archway between the foyer and the living room. Her face cycled through 3 expressions in 2 seconds. Shock, fury, forced composure. Megan. My name came out like a curse disguised as a greeting. "Hello, Mom. Happy New Year." She smoothed her face into hostess mode, the mask she wore for company. "I told you not to come. I know. I came anyway. This is a private party. It is a family party. And last I checked, I am still family. Or did my death certificate arrive?" 30 pairs of eyes watched us. Relatives, neighbors, business associates. The audience my mother never wanted for this moment. Patricia stepped forward and I watched my mother's face drain of color. "Patricia, what are you doing here?" "I was invited," Patricia said calmly, "by the same person who should have invited me 2 years ago. I do not know what lies you have been telling, but my mother started. The only lies in this room came from you, Victoria. And they are about to end." My father appeared, pushing through the crowd. Robert Porter, confused as always, following events he did not understand. "What is going on? Megan? Patricia?" He looked between his wife, his daughter, his sister-in-law, trying to piece together a puzzle no one had shown him. I met his eyes. "Dad, there is something you need to know about Grandma's will." My mother's voice cut sharp. "Do not you dare!" I kept my eyes on hers. "Where is Grandma's original will, Mom?" The silence that followed was devastating, every person in the room staring at Victoria. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. "I do not know what you are talking about." Patricia pulled a folder from her bag. "Then maybe this will refresh your memory." She held up the documents for everyone to see. The will Eleanor filed with Daniel Whitmore 6 months before she died. The one that leaves 60% of the bakery to Megan. The one you found and hid in your closet 2 years ago. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Uncle Richard stepped closer. "Victoria, is this true?" Aunt Helen's voice rose above the murmurs. 60%? Eleanor left the bakery to Megan? My mother's defense crumbled in real time. That document is not valid. Mother was not in her right mind. "She was sharper than any of us," Patricia cut in. "And she knew exactly what she was doing. She knew what you did, Victoria. She knew you tried to bury it. So she made a new one you could not touch." My father's face shifted from confusion to something I had never seen before. Horror. "Victoria," he said slowly, "you told me there was no will. You told me Eleanor died intestate. You lied to me?" My mother did not answer. For the first time in my life, she had no words. Brooke pushed through the crowd, her face flushed with fury. "What is this? Some kind of ambush?" She pointed at me. You planned this." "No, Brooke. I am just asking questions. The answers are all yours." Tyler stepped forward from the edge of the room where he had been watching. "I think everyone deserves to know what Brooke has been doing with the bakery's money." Brooke froze. "Tyler, what are you doing? What I should have done years ago." "Telling the truth." He addressed the room, his voice clear and steady. "For the past 3 years, Brooke has been transferring money from Porter Family Bakery into a private account. $187,000. And for the past 6 months, she has been negotiating to sell the bakery to a corporation, without telling anyone in this family." Brooke's voice rose to a shriek. "That is a lie!" Tyler held up his phone. "I have the bank records, the emails, everything. It is all documented, every transfer, every secret meeting." My mother's voice came out barely a whisper. "Brooke, is this true?" Brooke looked at her mother and said nothing. Her silence was the loudest confession in the room. My father sank into a chair, his head in his hands. "I do not understand. I do not understand any of this. How long have you all been lying to me?" No one answered. My mother turned on Brooke, her voice cracking. "You were going to sell the bakery? Behind my back? You were going to take the money and disappear?" Brooke tried to defend herself. "You do not understand, Mom. The bakery was failing because you were stealing from it." My mother's composure shattered completely. For the first time, she was not performing. She was genuinely devastated. The guests began edging toward the door, grabbing coats, murmuring excuses. Within 10 minutes, only family remained. The party was over. I stepped into the center of the room. I did not come here to destroy this family. I came here to give you a choice. Grandma's will is legal. It is filed with the state. I own 60% of the bakery. The house on Maple Street is mine. If anyone contests the will, they forfeit their share completely. Those are Grandma's terms, not mine, but I am offering something else. Accept the will. Stop the lies. Let the bakery be what Grandma wanted it to be, and we can figure out the rest together, or do not, and lose everything. I looked directly at my mother. Your choice, Mom. For once in your life, choose the truth. She stood in the center of her living room, surrounded by the ruins of everything she had built. The house she decorated, the party she planned, the image she protected, all of it crumbling around her. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then her voice came out small. I did not mean for it to go this far. I just wanted to protect the family. I wanted to protect what we built. You wanted to protect your version of the family, I said. The one where you are in control, the one where I do not exist. That family was never real, Mom. This is real. Right here. Right now. What are you going to do with it? She looked at me. Really looked at me. For the first time in 32 years, she seemed to actually see me. Her mouth opened to answer. And then she collapsed. Her hand went to her chest. Her face went gray. She crumpled to the floor before anyone could catch her. Dad rushed to her side. Victoria, someone call 911. Chaos erupted. Patricia took charge, clearing space, directing people. Tyler guided the paramedics when they arrived minutes later. Brooke stood frozen, useless. I stepped back and watched them load my mother onto a stretcher. James appeared beside me. Are you okay? I do not know. I finally told the truth. And it almost killed her. The ambulance doors closed. Dad climbed in beside his wife. Brooke followed in her car. I stayed behind in the empty house, champagne glasses abandoned on tables, decorations mocking the silence. The grandfather clock in the corner showed 11:30. 30 minutes until midnight. 30 minutes until the new year. And I did not know if my mother would see it. New Year's Day, 3:17 in the morning. I sat in the hospital waiting room, the same hospital where my mother had been rushed just hours before. James was asleep in the chair beside me, his hand still holding mine. Patricia paced by the window, her silhouette dark against the city lights. The fluorescent bulbs buzzed overhead, and the smell of antiseptic hung in the air. I had come. Despite everything she had done, despite the word dead still echoing in my memory, I had come. Because this was never about revenge. It was about truth. And truth had consequences I never fully imagined. The doctor emerged at 4 a.m. with news that made me exhale for the first time in hours. Victoria had suffered a stress-induced cardiac event, not a full heart attack. She was stable and would need to stay for observation. She is asking for her family, the doctor said. I hesitated. All of her family? The doctor's face remained neutral. She asked for Robert and Brooke. By name, not me. Even now, lying in a hospital bed, my mother had not asked for me. Patricia put a hand on my shoulder. Some things do not change overnight. I know. I just thought maybe. I did not finish the sentence. There was nothing to finish. Around 7 a.m, my father emerged from the hallway. He looked exhausted, aged 10 years in a single night. He walked toward me, stopped 3 feet away. His face was unreadable. She is going to be okay. I am glad. A long pause stretched between us. Then he said something I never expected. I did not know, Megan. About any of it. I know, Dad. He nodded once, turned, and walked away. It was not much, but it was the first honest words he had ever spoken to me. January 2nd. Daniel Whitmore's office, dark wood, leather chairs, the smell of old books and legal documents. Everyone was present. Me. Patricia. My mother in a wheelchair, still pale and weak from the hospital. My father beside her, his hand on her shoulder. Brooke, her face a mask of barely controlled fury. Tyler, sitting as far from his wife as the room would allow. The lawyer read the document in full, every word deliberate and legally precise. When he reached the numbers, I watched the reactions ripple across the room. To Megan Elizabeth Porter, 60% ownership of Porter Family Bakery, the residence at 847 Maple Street, and all personal effects of Eleanor Porter. To Patricia Sullivan, $100,000 and the complete recipe collection. To Victoria and Robert Porter, 30% ownership, held in trust, with dividend rights but no authority to sell or transfer. To Brooke Porter Mitchell, 10% ownership, same restrictions. My mother's face was stone. She did not look at anyone. Brooke's hands clenched in her lap so hard her knuckles went white. My father stared at the table like he could disappear into it. "Mrs. Porter," Whitmore said, his voice calm but firm, "I am obligated to inform you that any contest of this will activate the in terrorem clause. You would forfeit your entire share, as would anyone who joins such a contest." My mother's jaw tightened. The calculation was visible behind her eyes. Control versus loss. Pride versus survival. Finally, she whispered, "I understand. No contest." The will stood. The week after the reading, Whitmore contacted me about the evidence Tyler had provided. $187,000 embezzled over 3 years, all documented, all traceable. Criminal charges were possible. Embezzlement. Fraud. I thought about it for 2 days. Brooke in handcuffs, Brooke in court, Brooke in prison. The satisfaction of it. The justice. Then I thought about my grandmother's letter. Do what brings you peace. I met Brooke at a coffee shop far from family territory. She looked terrible, thin, pale, dark circles under her eyes. The golden child had finally lost her shine. "I am not pressing charges," I said. Her head snapped up. "What? You are going to pay back every cent. Over time. Out of your dividends. And you are going to sign over your 10% to the employee cooperative. Do that, and this stays between us." She stared at me like I was speaking a foreign language. Why? Because I am not like you. And because Grandma wanted peace, not war. You get one chance, Brooke. Do not waste it. Her eyes filled with tears. Not the performative tears I had seen at family gatherings. Real tears. The first genuine emotion I had ever witnessed from her. She nodded without speaking and signed the agreement I slid across the table. Tyler filed for divorce on January 5th. Brooke did not contest. She had nothing left to fight with. No money, no shares, no leverage. He came to my apartment one last time to return the USB drive. "You should keep the originals, just in case." "Thank you for everything, Tyler." He shook his head. "I should have done it years ago. I was a coward. I told myself I did not have a choice. We always have a choice. He was leaving Denver, starting over somewhere new. No contact with the family, no looking back. If you ever need a witness, you know where to find me. Take care of yourself, Tyler." Before he walked out the door, he paused. "Brooke told me something once. Years ago. She said your grandmother always liked you better. She hated you for it. Her whole life." He shrugged. "It was never about anything you did, Megan. It was about who you are." Then he was gone. Word spread fast through the bakery. The will, the theft, the family implosion. Employees had heard the rumors, and no one knew who was in charge. Production slowed. Morale crashed. 2 key bakers quit. I walked into Porter Family Bakery for the first time as majority owner. The smell of bread, flour, cinnamon. My grandmother's smell. Employees watched me with a mixture of hope and fear. "Is it true? You own it now?" "Yes." "What are you going to do?" I looked around at the ovens my grandmother had installed, the display cases, the photos on the walls. This was never supposed to be mine to run. I had a CMO position waiting, a career I had built myself, but this was Grandma's legacy. One of the bakers, Maria, approached me nervously. "Ms. Porter, some of us were talking. We have been here for years, decades, some of us. If there was a way for us to buy the bakery, would you consider it?" I looked at her weathered hands, dusted with flour like my grandmother's used to be. Tell me more. Over the next week, I met with Whitmore, my financial advisor, and the bakery employees. The plan took shape. An employee cooperative. The workers would buy the bakery from me at a symbolic price, with structured payments over 20 years, well below market value. I would retain a small advisory role, unpaid, to help with marketing. The bakery would stay in the hands of people who loved it. Grandma's legacy would continue through the people she trained, and I would be free to pursue my career without guilt. On January 15th, we signed the transfer documents in Whitmore's office. Maria and 5 other senior employees signed as the cooperative's founding board. There was champagne, tears, handshakes that meant more than any contract. What I kept was simple: Grandma's house on Maple Street, the memories, the knowledge that I had done the right thing. A letter arrived at my apartment on January 12th, my father's handwriting on the envelope. No return address, but I knew. I carried it to the kitchen and stood there for a long time before opening it. Inside was a single sheet of lined paper. Megan, I should have protected you. I did not. I told myself your mother knew best. It was easier than fighting. I watched you become invisible in our house, and I let it happen. I do not expect forgiveness. I do not deserve it. But I want you to know. I see you now. Maybe too late. Maybe not. Your father. I read it 3 times. No tears came. No rage. Just a strange, hollow sadness for the man who could have been my father but never was. I put the letter in a drawer. I did not respond. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I kept it. January 15th, evening. I stood in my grandmother's house. My house now. Empty rooms, dusty furniture, the smell of lavender and old wood. James beside me holding my hand. We could live here, I said. It needs work. Everything good needs work. I walked through the rooms, imagining them filled with light, with life. The kitchen where Grandma taught me to bake. The living room where I felt safe for the first time in my childhood. Let us do it. Let us make this home. James smiled. I thought you would never ask. He pulled me close and kissed my forehead. Outside, snow began to fall. My phone buzzed with a text from Patricia. There is something else Eleanor left. I found it in her writing desk. A letter. For you, sealed. I am bringing it tomorrow. Another letter. Another secret. My grandmother was not done speaking yet. Patricia arrived at my apartment on February 1st with a sealed envelope in her hands. Just one word on the front in my grandmother's handwriting. Megan. She handed it to me carefully like it might shatter. I found it hidden in her writing desk, behind a false panel. Eleanor always did love her secrets. I turned the envelope over, feeling the weight of it. The paper was yellowed, the seal old. She had written this long before she died and hidden it where only someone who truly knew her would find it. I will read it when I am ready, I said. Patricia nodded. Take your time. It has waited this long. I set the envelope on my dresser and tried to focus on the day ahead, but I could feel it there, waiting, like a voice that had not finished speaking. February 3rd was a Monday, and I walked into my company's all-hands meeting, wearing a suit I had bought for this moment. The CEO stood at the podium, and when she said my name, the room erupted in applause. I am pleased to announce our new Chief Marketing Officer, Megan Porter. I stepped up to the front, heart pounding but steady. I kept my speech brief, humble, thanking my team, my mentors, the opportunity. I did not mention my family. I did not need to. This was mine alone. After the meeting, colleagues shook my hand and offered congratulations. James was waiting by my new office door with flowers. CMO, I am dating a CMO. You are dating the same person you have always dated. Yeah, but now she has a corner office. I laughed, really laughed, for the first time in weeks. My family had never known about this promotion, never asked about my career or my ambitions or my dreams. Now I led a marketing division of 47 people, and they still thought I had a little marketing job. Their ignorance was no longer my burden. That night, alone in my apartment with James giving me space, I finally opened my grandmother's letter. My hands trembled as I broke the seal. Her handwriting was shakier than in the first letter, but still hers. The date at the top was 3 months before she died. My dearest Megan, if you are reading this, then you found it. Or Patricia did, which means the other plan worked. I am writing this because there is something I never told you, something I should have said when I was alive, but I was afraid it would hurt more than help. Your mother was not always the woman you know. When she was young, when Patricia and I still talked freely, Victoria was kind, uncertain maybe, desperate to prove herself, but kind. Something changed when she married your father. I do not know if it was his family's expectations, or her own insecurities, or just the weight of trying to be perfect in a world that demands too much of women. She became hard, controlling. She built walls so high she forgot there were people on the other side. When Brooke was born, Victoria saw herself, a chance to do it right, to be the mother she wished she had. When you were born, she saw me, and she was terrified. You see, Megan, your mother and I were never close. I reminded her of everything she wanted to escape. The bakery, the simple life, the woman who worked with her hands instead of her image. You reminded her of me, and she could not love what she was running from. This was never your fault. It was never about who you are. It was about who she could not be. I am telling you this not to excuse her, but to free you. You do not have to understand her to move on. You do not have to forgive her to be whole. But if someday you want to try, know that there is a woman underneath all that armor. A woman I used to know. Whether she is still there, only time will tell. I love you forever. Grandma Eleanor. I read the letter 3 times. Tears streamed down my face, but not from sadness, from understanding. The missing piece had finally clicked into place. I was never the problem. I was never wrong. I was just a reminder of something my mother could not face. February 15th, James and I officially moved into my grandmother's Victorian house. 847 Maple Street, now mine. We pulled up in a rented moving truck, boxes stacked everywhere, the smell of dust and lavender and possibility filling every room. The renovation began immediately. Every weekend through February and March, we stripped old wallpaper, painted fresh colors, rebuilt what time had worn down. James fixed the porch railing that had sagged for years. I refinished the kitchen cabinets my grandmother had installed decades ago. We found treasures hidden throughout the house. Old photos behind a loose floorboard. A recipe card tucked in a cabinet labeled Eleanor's Secret Cinnamon Rolls, for Megan only. A small carved wooden box containing my grandmother's wedding ring. Each discovery was a gift from beyond. The house came alive again, filled with light, with laughter, with music my grandmother had loved. One evening we were painting the living room, both of us splattered with pale blue. James stopped, brush in hand, and looked at me with an expression I could not read. You know what this room needs? What? He set down the brush, got down on one knee. My heart stopped. A different kind of question. He pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was a simple diamond ring, vintage setting, beautiful. I found it at an estate sale. It reminded me of your grandmother's ring. Megan Porter, will you marry me? I did not hesitate. Yes, 1,000 times yes. He slid the ring on my finger. It fit perfectly. Of course it did. The bakery was thriving. Maria and the cooperative had taken ownership seriously, bringing new systems, new energy, new pride to everything they did. The same recipes my grandmother perfected, made by hands she had trained. I helped with marketing as I had promised, creating new branding that honored the heritage. 3 generations of Denver tradition, now worker-owned. A feature in Denver magazine called it the bakery that chose its people. Sales were up 34% in 2 months, 3 new hires, Plans for a second location. Maria visited me at the house one afternoon, bringing cinnamon rolls still warm from the oven. "You did not have to do this," she said. "Yes, I did. Grandma would have wanted it. She would be so proud of you. She would be proud of all of us." Before she left, Maria hesitated at the door. "There is something I should tell you. Your mother came to the bakery last week." I tensed. What did she want? She stood outside for 10 minutes. Then she left without coming in. She looked smaller than I remembered. Patricia, no longer exiled, began rebuilding her own relationships. Aunt Helen reached out first, then cousins, old friends, people who had believed the lies. One by one, the truth spread, and the walls fell. I hosted a Sunday dinner at the Victorian house. Patricia, Aunt Helen, Uncle Richard, 2 cousins. James cooked while I laughed. The house full of warmth it had not felt in years. The family I never had was forming around me. "Some families you are born into," Patricia said, raising her glass. "Some families you build. To building. To building." After dinner, Patricia pulled me aside. "Your father called me yesterday. What did he want?" "He wanted to know if you were happy. I did not know what to tell him. So I said yes. Was that okay?" I considered the question. Yeah, that was okay. Through Patricia, through the family grapevine, fragments reached me about my mother and Brooke. They were increasingly isolated. Brooke had moved to a small apartment, working a retail job to pay her restitution. My mother's health was fragile after the cardiac event. My father was still at home, but something had shifted between them. The family that once revolved around Victoria was spinning away. No one visited the McMansion anymore. The holiday parties had stopped. The perfect image had cracked beyond repair. I did not gloat. There was no satisfaction in their suffering, just a quiet acknowledgement that consequences are real. Choices matter. Actions have weight. I did not reach out. Not yet, maybe not ever. But I did not wish them harm. I just wished them clarity. Late March. James and I sat on the porch swing my grandmother had loved. The garden was showing signs of spring, green shoots pushing through brown earth. The ring on my finger caught the sunset light. The house behind us was warm and finished and ours. CMO of a growing company, engaged to a man who truly saw me. A house filled with my grandmother's memory and new love. A family rebuilt from truth instead of pretense. A bakery thriving in the hands of people who cared. For the first time in my life, I had everything I did not know I needed. Not because someone gave it to me, because I built it myself. My phone buzzed. A text from a number I had not seen in months. "Dad, your mother had another episode. She is asking for you. I know you do not have to come. But she is asking." I stared at the screen. The porch swing creaked in the silence. James watched my face. "What are you going to do?" I did not answer, because I genuinely did not know. The text still glowed on my phone. "She is asking for you. I know you do not have to come. But she is asking." The porch swing swayed gently beneath me, and James waited for my answer. I stared at the words until the screen went dark. "I do not know what to do. You do not have to decide right now, but she is in the hospital, and she put you through 32 years of hell." The truth sat between us, heavy and undeniable. "What does your gut say, Megan?" I closed my eyes and breathed. My gut said things I did not want to admit. It said I needed to go, not for her, for me, for the closure I had never gotten, for the chance to look at her and know I was finally free. James drove through the Denver night while I stared out the window. The city lights blurred past, and I thought about my grandmother's letter. There is a woman underneath all that armor. A woman I used to know. Whether she is still there, only time will tell. Was this the time? Was my mother finally broken enough to be real? Or was this another trap, another manipulation designed to pull me back into the role I had spent my whole life escaping? I decided I would not expect anything. I would not demand anything. I would walk in, see what happened, and leave when I was ready. No script, no performance, Just presence. James squeezed my hand at the hospital entrance. I will be right here. Take as long as you need. What if I need to leave in 5 minutes? Then we leave in 5 minutes. I kissed him. Then I walked through the doors alone. 3rd floor, room 317. The hallway was quiet except for the soft beeping of monitors behind closed doors. My father sat outside on a plastic chair, his head in his hands. He looked older than I had ever seen him, gray and diminished, the weight of everything finally visible on his face. He looked up when I approached. "You came. You asked." He nodded slowly, then explained what had happened. She had a small stroke. They caught it early. There was some weakness on her left side, difficulty speaking, but she was lucid. She knew what was happening. Why does she want to see me? I do not know. She just kept saying your name. She has not said Brooke's name once. He paused, his voice cracking. Maybe she finally figured out which daughter matters. I stared at him. That was the most honest thing he had ever said about our family. She might not be able to say much, he continued. The stroke affected her speech. That is okay. I am not sure I need her to talk. I think I just need to see her. I pushed open the door. The room was small and dim, lit only by machines that beeped softly in the shadows. A window showed the city lights beyond, indifferent to the drama playing out inside. And in the bed was my mother. She looked small. Not the towering figure from my childhood, not the controlling matriarch from Christmas dinner. Just a 60-year-old woman in a hospital gown, her left arm limp at her side, her face slightly drooping. Her eyes were closed. I stood in the doorway for a long moment, taking it in. This was the woman who had called me dead. The woman who hid my grandmother's will. The woman who chose Brooke over and over and over again. And also, somewhere underneath, the woman my grandmother once knew. The scared girl who built walls so high she forgot what was on the other side. I walked to the bedside, pulled up a chair and sat down. I did not speak. I just waited. After a full minute, her eyes fluttered open. They found my face, and something happened that I had never seen before. Tears. Real tears. Rolling down her cheek. Her mouth moved, slurred and broken. You came. She tried to speak, but the stroke had stolen her eloquence. Words came out fragmented, effortful. I did not think you would come. I almost did not. I did not soften it. I did not pretend. She nodded, a jerky motion, accepting. What came next took time, long pauses between words, enormous effort for each syllable. I was afraid. Of you. I blinked. Afraid of me? You were like her, Mother. You did not need me. Like Brooke did. I did not know what to do with someone who did not need me. So I pushed you away. Before you could leave. The revelation landed like something heavy falling into place. She was not just cruel. She was terrified. Terrified of a daughter who reminded her of everything she could not be. Terrified of being left by someone strong enough to survive without her. Her hand twitched on the bed. Moving toward me, not grabbing, not demanding, just reaching. I looked at it. The hand that signed report cards without reading them. The hand that pointed at the door on Christmas Eve. The hand that hid my grandmother's will. I did not take it, not yet. But I did not move away either. I spoke the truth I had carried for 32 years. You hurt me, every day. For 32 years. You made me feel invisible, worthless, wrong. And I spent so long trying to figure out what I did, what was broken in me that made you not love me. She listened, her eyes fixed on my face, tears still falling, no interruption, no defense, just listening, maybe for the first time ever. But I know now, I continued. It was never about me. It was about you, about what you could not face, and I am done carrying that. I am done being the one who was wrong. I let the words settle before I offered what I could. I am not going to pretend we are okay. We are not. I am not going to say I forgive you. I do not know if I do. But I am here. I came when you asked. That is all I can give you right now. It might be all I can ever give you." She took a shaky breath, nodded. One word came out clearer than the others. Enough. It sounded like acceptance. It sounded like release. Her good hand gestured toward the nightstand. A small box I had not noticed. "For you." I opened it and found a stack of handwritten recipe cards. My grandmother's handwriting. Recipes I had never seen. At the top was a note. "For my granddaughter Megan," the only one who understood. Below that, in different handwriting, another note. "Victoria, please give these to her when you are ready. I hope you will be ready someday." My grandmother had left these with my mother, asked her to give them to me. My mother had held onto them for 2 years after Grandma died, and now finally she was letting go. I flipped through the cards. Cinnamon rolls, apple pie, brown butter cookies. At the bottom of the stack was one more card. Not a recipe. A note. Grandma's handwriting. If Victoria gave you these herself, there might be hope yet. But do not wait for her, sweetheart. Build your own table. I stood, the box in my hands. My mother watched me, exhausted but awake. "I have to go." She nodded. Her eyes said what her mouth could not. "I understand." I hesitated at the bedside. Then, slowly, I reached out and placed my hand on top of hers. Just for a moment. Just long enough to feel warmth. "Goodbye, Mom. Not forever. Not never. Just for now." I walked out without looking back. Through the door, past my father still crying quietly in his chair, down the hallway, into the elevator, through the lobby, into the night air. James was right where he said he would be. He saw my face and opened his arms. I walked into them and finally let myself cry. The drive home was quiet, his hand on my knee, the city lights passing, the box of recipe cards in my lap. I did not feel forgiveness. I did not feel reconciliation. But something had shifted. A weight I did not know I was carrying set down. A door not closed, but no longer locked. We arrived at the Victorian house, our home. I walked up the porch steps, through the door my grandmother used to open, into the kitchen that still smelled faintly of lavender. I set the recipe cards on the counter and looked at Grandma's note again. "Build your own table." I smiled. That was exactly what I had been doing. My phone lit up with a text from Patricia. "Wedding planning meeting tomorrow? I have ideas." I laughed, the first real laugh since the hospital. I typed back, "Bring the champagne. We are celebrating life." Outside, the first buds were appearing on my grandmother's apple tree. Spring was here. Everything was beginning again. May 17th. I stood at the window of my grandmother's Victorian house, the house that was now mine, watching the garden come alive in the morning light. Roses bloomed along the fence. Lilacs perfumed the air. The apple tree was heavy with blossoms, white and pink against the blue sky. Today was my wedding day. The house that once held secrets now held only light. I pressed my hand against the cool glass and whispered to the empty room. "We made it, Grandma. We really made it." The house had been transformed overnight, white chairs arranged in perfect rows across the garden, an arch of flowers standing where my grandmother's old swing used to hang. Caterers moved through the kitchen, and the smell of fresh bread filled every room. Maria had insisted on providing everything from the bakery, her gift to us, her way of saying thank you. Guests began arriving early. Patricia had been here since dawn, fussing with flowers and adjusting tablecloths. Aunt Helen was upstairs steaming my dress. Cousins laughed in the hallway. Friends from work, from the neighborhood, from the life I had built, filled the rooms with warmth. I stood in the middle of it all and felt something I had chased my entire life. Belonging. I was surrounded by people who chose me. People I had chosen back. Patricia knocked on the bedroom door, her face carrying an expression I could not read. "There is someone here. He is asking if he can come in." My heart skipped. "Who?" "Your father." I descended the stairs in my robe and found him standing in the foyer, hat in his hands, shoulders hunched. He looked smaller than I remembered, older, but also cleaner somehow, like shame had been washed away and something more honest remained. "I was not sure if I should come," he said. "I was not sure I would be welcome. But I could not miss this. I could not miss you." I studied his face, searching for the manipulation I had learned to expect. I found only exhaustion and hope. "You are welcome here, Dad, but you need to understand. This is my day, my family. If you are here to celebrate, you can stay. If you are here to make peace with Mom, that is not happening today." He nodded slowly. "I am here for you. Just you. I should have been here for you a long time ago. I am sorry I was not." It was the first real apology I had ever received from him. Not perfect, not enough to erase 32 years, but real. "You can sit in the back," I said, "and stay for cake after." His eyes filled with tears. "Thank you. Do not thank me. Just be here. Really be here." Patricia helped me into my dress. Simple ivory lace. Elegant without being extravagant. I wore my grandmother's pearl earrings, the ones I had found in the carved wooden box. Something old. Patricia's silk handkerchief tucked into my bodice. Something borrowed. A blue ribbon sewn into the hem where no one would see it. Something new was the dress itself, bought with money I had earned, for a life I had built. I looked at myself in the mirror and did not see the invisible girl anymore. I did not see the daughter who was never enough. I saw a woman who had walked through fire and come out stronger. Patricia stood behind me, hands on my shoulders. "Eleanor would be bursting with pride right now. You look just like her on her wedding day, strong, beautiful, completely yourself." I picked up my bouquet of white roses, my grandmother's favorites, and walked downstairs toward my future. 50 guests sat on white chairs in the garden. James waited under the flower arch, his face changing the moment he saw me. Pure, unguarded love. The kind I did not know existed until I met him. I walked the aisle alone. My choice. No one gave me away because I was not something to be given. I gave myself. Our vows were simple, personal, words we had written together in the half-painted living room months ago. James spoke first. "I promise to always see you, even when you try to disappear." My voice caught as I answered. "I promise to trust that I am worth seeing. Because you taught me I am." There were tears in the audience, Patricia openly sobbing. Even my father, sitting alone in the back row, wiped his eyes with the handkerchief I had never seen him carry. The officiant pronounced us married. James cupped my face in his hands, his eyes holding mine. "Hello, wife. Hello, husband." We kissed, and the garden erupted in applause. As we turned to face our guests, my eyes found my father in the back row. He was smiling, a real smile, not a performance. He nodded once. I nodded back. It was not forgiveness. It was acknowledgement. It was enough. The reception spilled across the lawn as the afternoon stretched into evening. Tables set with flowers. Maria's cinnamon rolls served as dessert. Music my grandmother used to hum in the kitchen played softly while children ran through the garden and laughter echoed off the old Victorian walls. Patricia stood with champagne in hand and raised a toast. To Eleanor, who brought us all together even from beyond. To Megan, who taught us what strength really looks like. And to James, who had the good sense to love her. Glasses raised, cheers echoed. Maria approached with a small package wrapped in brown paper. From all of us at the bakery. Inside was a framed photo of my grandmother in the kitchen, flour on her apron, laughing at something just out of frame. Below it a small plaque, Porter Family Bakery, built by Eleanor, saved by Megan, owned by Love. My eyes filled. You did not have to. Yes, we did. You gave us everything. My father found me near the edge of the celebration as the sun began to set. I should go. Let you enjoy your day. You do not have to leave yet. I know, but I think this is where I should step back. He touched my shoulder briefly, gently. Your mother wanted me to tell you she is sorry she could not come. Is she? I do not know. But I think she wanted to be. He walked away, and I let him go. As the party continued, I slipped inside and walked through the house alone. The kitchen where Grandma taught me to bake. The living room where James and I had danced in paint-splattered clothes. The hallway lined with photos old and new. I found my grandmother's chair in the small sunroom at the back, the worn velvet, the curve that fit perfectly. I sat down and let the silence wrap around me. I did it, Grandma. I built my own table. I found people who see me, and I finally see myself. I closed my eyes, and for just a moment I swore I felt a hand on my shoulder. Light, warm, gone before I could turn. I smiled, thank you. Evening painted the garden in gold as the last guests said their goodbyes. Patricia helped clean up, refusing to leave. The fairy lights we had strung through the trees began to glow against the darkening sky. James found me on the porch swing, wrapped in a blanket, watching the stars appear. There is my wife. There is my husband. He sat beside me and pulled me close. The swing creaked softly, the same sound it made when my grandmother was alive. So, what do we do now? He asked. Now? We live. Just like that, one day at a time. He kissed my forehead. I liked the sound of that. Me too. 1 year later, May again, the anniversary of our wedding. I stood in the same garden, my hand resting on my belly, 6 months along with a life we had created together. The apple tree was heavy with fruit. The roses were blooming. Everything my grandmother had planted was still growing. I knew now what had become of everyone. My mother never fully recovered from the stroke. She lived in assisted care, and I visited occasionally. We did not pretend to be close, but we were civil. Brooke had finished paying her restitution and moved to Seattle. We did not speak. My father came to dinner once a month. He was learning slowly how to be present. The bakery had just opened its second location. Maria was thriving. Patricia was my maid of honor and would soon be godmother to my child. The family I was born into had broken. The family I built was growing. I understood now what my grandmother had been trying to teach me all along. Family is not blood, family is choice. Forgiveness is not required. But freedom is possible. Silence can be survival, but voice is power. And the loudest revenge? A life well lived. I stood where my grandmother's swing used to hang, James inside making dinner, singing off key the way he always did. The house was full of light, full of love, full of life we had built together. Snow began to fall, the first of winter, covering the garden in white, making everything look new. If you have ever been told you were too much or not enough for your own family, if you have ever stood in a room full of people and felt completely alone, if you have ever wondered whether the truth was worth the cost, remember this: silence can be power. Truth can be the loudest revenge. But peace, real peace, is what you build when you stop waiting for people to see you and start building a table where you belong. I would love to know what peace looks like for you. Where are you listening from right now? What part of this story found you? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. And if this story meant something to you, if you have ever been the invisible one, the forgotten one, the one they underestimated, hit that subscribe button. Because this channel, this is our table now, and there is always room for one more. Outside, the snow kept falling. Inside, I finally understood what home felt like. It felt like this. It felt like peace. This story is fictionalized for dramatic effect.